Revelation 1608. From the 12th of September 1940. Divine order. Chaos. Direction of that to bless. Only one will applies to the universe, and this will governs all spiritual as well as earthly visible things, that is his entire work of creation, which came into being through his will. As far as the divine will is followed by the spiritual, which is still banished in form, as well as by the spiritual, which is free from all restraints, the divine order is completely established and only a higher development of all spiritual can be the result. But the state of free will, which is granted to the spiritual for the last redemption, is often the greatest danger for it because it starts to revolt against divine will. Through its will it therefore grants a certain power to God's opposite pole, which now opposes the divine will. And God does not force this will, and therefore during the embodiment as a human being the earthly creation is, as it were, exposed to another power, as soon as the human being himself gives consent to it. Thus the human will consciously opposes divine will and is not prevented from doing so, but it has to accept the consequences of the wrong will. The divine will is always aimed at perfection, the good, the light state of his beings and the increase of good spiritual strength, whereas the will of the opponent only strives for the opposite and the human being supports, thus favors, this endeavor through his will. And only because of this is it possible that there is unparalleled chaos on earth, that spiritual as well as earthly decay can be observed, that the elements of the underworld make themselves so clearly felt and humanity increasingly approaches its downfall. For this is what the adversary wants. He wants to destroy everything that testifies to God and sees his power. And he succeeds in doing so insofar as the human being's will is submissive to him. However, he cannot force this will, he can only weaken it such that it completely subordinates itself to him. Therefore the state of free will is a danger for the being insofar as it can throw it back into deepest spiritual night, which it had already overcome for the most part. But the divine will nevertheless governs everything that exists, even though he leaves the being free will and does not banish the adversary's will. He also directs everything caused by this evil and wrong will so that it can nevertheless result in the human being's release from this power. People cause all the harm that befalls them themselves and yet this harm can be a blessing for them again. Thus free will is certainly the cause of the most dreadful events on earth and yet these can bring the individual person realization again. They can be the cause of a complete inner transformation, of turning away from the one who was the originator of the dreadful thing. What is the fault of human will can, through divine will, become the opposite of what it should actually be. Complete decay and indescribable chaos can suddenly order the thoughts of man and make them subject to divine will, and every deed that evil will give birth to can lead to the salvation of erring souls by recognizing what was detestable and now turning to their Creator full of desire and now finally subordinating their will to divine will. Amen.